Mr. Vice President, thank you for being here. And I should note where we are. We're in Boston at the JFK Library because you just received the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award last night for certifying the election results in 2020. And in your acceptance speech, you invoked the Constitution and you said it's the common ground on which we stand. How has that been a guiding principle for you?
Well, it's good to see you, Caitlin. Thanks. Thanks for traveling up here to the Kennedy Library. It was deeply humbling for me to receive the recognition, the Profile and Courage Award last night. As I shared with his family, President Kennedy was an inspiring figure since I was a little boy, and his eloquence and his example inspires me still. And so to be in any way associated with President Kennedy's legacy is something I'll cherish for the rest of my life. But as I shared last night, the thing that I am more convinced of than ever is that as we face challenges in our country at home and abroad, as we resolve differences between Americans, that the Constitution is the common ground on which we stand. And I saw that firsthand over the last 4 years when people literally from every political perspective have stopped me on the street, walked up to me in airports, and simply expressed appreciation for the fact that, as I said last night, that I believe I did my duty under the Constitution on that fateful day to see to the peaceful transfer of power. The American people cherish our Constitution. They cherish our rich traditions in liberty, and I think recognizing that the people of this country will always stand on that common ground, it should be a great source of encouragement to all of us.
Well, given that, when President Trump was asked if he thinks that he has to uphold the Constitution, he said, quote, "I don't know." Is there any doubt in your view that the president must uphold the Constitution?
Well, we all take the same oath, which is we put our left hand on a Bible and raise our right hand, and we swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And despite our enduring differences about my duty 4 years ago, I believe President Trump understands that well. Honestly, Caitlin, I saw a bit of that clip, and I think the president was simply saying that he didn't yet know what his lawyer's view of that question was. But I served alongside the president for 4.5 years. We had a good working relationship. I'm proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration, and I believe the president understands what his responsibilities and duties are. And also, I want to say that I have great confidence in Attorney General Pam Bondi and in the team around the president. I think Tom Homan is a great lawman, and as I wrote last week, I commend President Trump and the administration for the strong steps that they've taken to secure our border and reduce illegal immigration by 90%. I think these are important steps. It's what the American people were hoping to see, and I greatly welcome it.
But in your view, there's no question of whether the president has to uphold the Constitution.
Oh, no, we all take, as my Marine Corps son reminded me a few days before January 6th, he said, you took the same oath I took, Dad. It's the oath that people in the military, people in law enforcement, people in public life take. And I have every confidence the president understands his responsibilities.
He didn't say it nearly as clearly as you did this just there, because he was asked about this argument that has been playing out when it comes to, you mentioned immigration, but a lot of this isn't playing out, not on the southern border, but inside the courtroom and court fights. And when he was asked if he agreed that everyone on U.S. soil deserves due process, he also said, quote, "I don't know, I'm not a lawyer," despite it being guaranteed by the Fifth Amendment. Is it clear to you that everyone on U.S. soil is afforded due process?
Well, I think that's one of the genius aspects of our system and of our Constitution is that the protections and the liberties that are enshrined there are provided to persons in America, not just citizens in America. And I have every confidence that the administration understands that. You know, the Supreme Court recently ruled that the president was fully acting within the law to use the Foreign Aliens Act to deport individuals from this country. That called for reasonable due process, recognizing that the safety of the American people is paramount when people are in this country illegally, when people represent a threat to our communities, when they're engaged in criminal activities. There's a different standard. And as I said, I have confidence in the administration. I have confidence in our Attorney General, and also, as I said, confidence in Tom Homan, who has a long career, served in our administration with great distinction, that they'll work through the issues of due process with the backstop of our courts. But the priority has to be to protect our communities. I mean, we have seen tragic consequences over the last 4 years from the open borders policies of the Biden administration. And I think in many respects, President Trump's historic victory, that incredible comeback of a year ago, last fall, was owing to the fact that the American people wanted to get back to the policies of our administration, not only on the economy, also believe on the world stage, and certainly in the way that we secured the southern border of the United States.
But can they do both? Can't you protect communities and also provide people due process, in your view?
You sure can. And I have confidence in our justice system. I have confidence in our courts that will do just that, Caitlin.
On the economy, you obviously were serving as vice president the last time President Trump was putting tariffs in place. He's gone much bigger and broader this time, and he seems to be downplaying any concerns that people have about a recession. Instead, he's arguing in the long run his policies will be successful. Do you worry, though, that the tariffs he's putting in place could potentially lead the U.S. into a recession?
Well, let me back up for a second and say that I really do believe that President Trump's historic reelection last year was in many respects not just a reflection of a personality, but it was also that what I heard all over the country is that people wanted to get back to the policies of our administration. In addition to strong American leadership on the world stage, which we can get into in a minute, it also was that we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy. But we also used targeted tariffs, particularly against China, after decades of trade abuses and intellectual property theft. We brought China to the table and achieved that 2020 Phase 1 trade deal that was truly historic and was a beginning of changing the dynamic of our relationship with China. So now, as I see this administration, I do have concerns that with the president's call for broad-based tariffs against friend and foe alike, that ultimately the administration is advancing policies that are not targeted at countries that have been abusing our trade relationship, but rather are essentially new industrial policy that will result in inflation, that will harm consumers and ultimately harm the American economy. So again, I want to be clear, when it comes to China, when it comes to decades of trade abuses, my view always is free trade with free nations, that we ought to be engaging our trading partners across the free world to lower trade barriers, lower non-tariff barriers and subsidies. But when it comes to authoritarian regimes, we ought to get tough, stay tough, and demand that they open their markets and respect our intellectual property.
He dubbed it Liberation Day, and you wrote in reference to that the only thing that Americans had been liberated from were trillions of dollars in investments. Do you think he understands the impact that it could be having on regular Americans?
I think he does. But
he's still doing it anyway, in your view?
President Trump and I had many long conversations about trade in our 4.5 years. I strongly supported our administration's policies on trade, including the Get Tough policies with Mexico and Canada that resulted in the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, the largest trade agreement in U.S. history. But we were well on our way. We'd renegotiated a trade agreement with South Korea. We were well on our way to a new trade agreement with Japan, with the UK, even the EU was in discussions. But it was all based on using his instinct that tariffs serve the American economy to bring our trading partners to the table to open up markets. My concern now is I see the president following more of what I think has been his historic view, that at the end of the day, a certain minimum threshold of tariffs on all goods coming into the country will serve the American public and our economy. Some people believe that. I hold the view that trade means jobs, and that if we were to erect even the 10% minimum tariff that is on today, if that was all that remained after this, I think ultimately it would stifle American growth, limit prosperity, drive up costs for American consumers, and we ought to be driving again toward that principle of free trade with free nations and standing firm on authoritarian regimes like China.
So you think he's wrong on tariffs?
I do think this version of tariff policy that's broad-based, indiscriminate, applies tariffs to friend and foe alike, is not a win for the American people.
One argument he's been making lately is that maybe children will have to make do with fewer toys, fewer dolls. The quote that he had yesterday was, "I'm just saying that they don't need to have 30 dolls, they can have 3. They don't need to have 250 pencils, they can have 5. Do you think the American people buy that argument? I
have 2 grown daughters. I have 3 small granddaughters, and look, keeping dolls affordable, keeping our kids' toys affordable, that really is part of the American dream. I remember recently the Secretary of the Treasury said that cheap goods was not a part of the American dream. Well, I'm somebody who spent almost my entire life in public service. We lived on our paycheck while we raised 3 kids and put 3 kids through college. Cheap goods are a big part of it. And I think we ought to be candid about that. What I will give the president credit for is conceding the fact that his tariff policies will raise the cost of goods for consumers, whether it be toys or pencils or other products. And I appreciate him being forthright about that. I just think the American people
but is he being forthright about that?
Cherish their freedom to purchase their goods at the lowest possible cost. And that's not to say that at the end of the day there are key industries that are important to have here, but I think the way we generate manufacturing jobs, I think the way we generate high-tech jobs, the way we generate the kind of jobs that will serve America's security and prosperity is by making the Trump-Pence tax cuts permanent, rolling back regulation, lowering the cost of energy across the board, and making America the most attractive place in the world to invest and create jobs.
Well, and obviously he came into office promising to lower prices. So if prices go up as a result of those policies, is that backtracking on a pretty big campaign promise?
Well, some prices have gone down, as the president has conceded, and prices will fluctuate. But I do have a concern that when the so-called 90-day pause comes off, that even the administration has conceded that there may be a price shock in the economy, and there may be shortages. Caitlin, there were reports over the weekend of maybe a 35% reduction in the number of imports headed our way across the Pacific, I think the American people are going to see the consequences of this. I think they'll demand a different approach, and I think that approach is free trade with free nations. Let's use the leverage, the threat of tariffs, to negotiate down trade barriers with free nations, even while we stand firm with China and others.
You have been very outspoken on foreign policy, especially when it comes to the war in Ukraine. You've traveled to Ukraine, met with President Zelensky. When President Trump says that he thinks President Putin wants peace, do you agree with that?
Well, I think if the last 3 years teaches us anything, it's that Vladimir Putin doesn't want peace, he wants Ukraine. And the fact that we are now nearly 2 months following a ceasefire agreement that Ukraine has agreed to, and Russia continues to delay and give excuses, I think confirms that point. Look, I've met Vladimir Putin. I have studied his leadership in Russia over the decades, and I really believe that Putin only understands power. And it's the reason why in this moment we need to make it clear that the United States is going to continue to lead the free world, to provide Ukraine with the military support they need to repel the Russian invasion and achieve a just and lasting peace. The wavering support the administration has shown over the last few months, I believe, has only emboldened Russia. We continue to see their brutal assault on civilian populations, claiming innocent lives. But let me be clear, this is not just about Ukraine for me. I mean, I really do believe that if Vladimir Putin overruns Ukraine, it's just a matter of time before he crosses a border where our men and women in uniform are going to have to go fight him. I mean, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia are all NATO allies, and if Russia crosses those borders, we have a treaty obligation to engage them militarily. I hold, as we sit here at the Kennedy Library, I hold to that old Reagan doctrine that if you're willing to fight our enemies on your soil, we'll give you the means to fight them there so we don't have to fight them. And that's the principle we should be following here in giving President Zelensky and Ukraine the military support they need to repel and to stand down that brutal Russian invasion.
You talked about studying Putin. There has been some concern or questions that maybe he's stringing the president along, that he's just slow walking the negotiations with no intent of coming to the table. Do you share that view?
Well, I think President Trump is starting to suspect that. He said not long ago that he was concerned he might be tapping him along, as he says, in that New York parlance. And I think he's right. If I was sitting with the president right now instead of you, I would tell him, follow your instincts on this. That's who this guy is. And he only understands strength. I mean, look, there's a reason why Russia never even attempted to redraw international lines by force during our first 4 years. And that was because our administration rebuilt our military. We took down Nord Stream 2, which was a tremendous blow to Russia. We gave approval to our military in Syria to take out 100 Russian mercenaries without a single American casualty. We fired cruise missiles not once but twice into Syria against Russia's ally, the Bashar Assad regime. Russia knew we were willing to use military force to defend our interests and our allies. And so different than the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and then the Biden administration, Vladimir Putin stayed across the border during our years. And it convinced me more than anything else that this is a moment for American strength. And the pathway to peace is by an unwavering commitment to freedom.
Given that, I just have to know what was going through your mind when you were watching that remarkable Oval Office meeting where President Trump and Vice President Vance had an incredibly contentious exchange with President Zelensky. What would you have done if you were in that room that day?
Well, I've been in a lot of contentious meetings in the Oval Office, just usually not on camera. There was one occasion where we had congressional leaders in that got a little sporty. My own personal posture was to
But this is a president who's fighting for his country. And you've met President Zelensky, so I wonder what you thought when you saw that.
Well, I thought it was regrettable. I thought President Zelensky was ill-advised to take his argument before the media in the Oval Office, and I thought it was unfortunate the way the president and the administration responded in that moment. But I'm encouraged all the way through the knee-to-knee meeting at the Vatican that it looks like we put the dialogue back together. Look, this really matters, I believe, for not just for Ukraine, not just for Europe, but for America, for all the reasons that I said, Caitlin. I think it's absolutely essential, and I'm very encouraged that the president secured this historic minerals deal with Ukraine. I think that's going to benefit the American people with rare earth minerals, but more important than that, it sends a deafening message to Moscow that America and Ukraine are here to stay.
Yeah. Well, given contentious Oval Office meetings, the new Prime Minister of Canada is visiting tomorrow. The president has been saying that he's not kidding when he's talking about making Canada the 51st state. What advice would you give to the new Prime Minister as he's going into that meeting?
Well, I don't know that I would advise the Prime Minister of Canada. I worked with his predecessor, and look,
Do you think Canada should be the 51st state?
I think Canada's been a great ally of ours, whose soldiers have fought and died alongside Americans in every war since World War I. And but I think I'd suggest to him that you come in and let your yes be yes and your no be no, and speak plainly to the president. I think President Trump respects strength. He respects people with conviction and has the capacity to adjust. I expect it'll be a good meeting.
Do you think he's serious when he won't rule out military force to retake Greenland or to take Greenland?
Well, I think Greenland is enormously important to us and our national security. But the fact that we already have 2 military bases there and the ability to negotiate further is more than enough for us to satisfy that need, and then otherwise allow the people of our 2 nations to discuss any arrangements going forward.
Okay, so you don't think it needs to be taken over by military force?
I think we can address our security needs in Greenland by other means. Your
organization, Advancing American Freedom, publicly opposed the nomination and, it turns out, the confirmation of RFK Jr. as the HHS secretary. The United States right now is facing its single largest measles outbreak in 25 years. Do you trust his leadership in a moment like this one?
Well, as you know, Caitlin, I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And the very idea that a Republican president would nominate an abortion rights supporter to lead the Department of Health and Human Services was just unacceptable to me. Policies regarding the sanctity of life, regarding conscience protections, all flow through HHS, and I had those concerns. Evidence recently with the Secretary's FDA chief, who said, despite promises that were made in the confirmation hearings, that they have no plans to even look into the harmful effect of the abortion pill on women across the country. And so that was the core of our concern. But as I said, I've got 4 grandchildren, going on 5, coming this fall.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And measles is a very serious disease, particularly for small children, and we should send no message across America other than to encourage parents at the time that young children are able to be vaccinated to get that measles vaccine. It's a completely preventable disease, and I do have concerns that we have a secretary at HHS who has had a lifetime career of undermining public confidence in vaccines. We should have the opposite, and I hope that we continue to hear voices around the country that speak into this moment for the sake of our kids and our grandkids.
I mentioned the reason that we're here and why you were getting this award, and it's because of how you acted and what you did, or to the president's chagrin, did not do on January 6th. And when you were recounting that day during your speech last night, the line stood out to me where you said the only heroes that you saw that day were wearing uniforms, meaning the officers who were there protecting the Capitol and protecting you and others. What should it say to the American people then that President Trump pardoned the people who were convicted of assaulting police officers that day?
Over the last 4 years, I've had people come up and thank me for what I did that day. But I've said 100 times, the only heroes I saw that day were wearing uniforms. When we were evacuated down to the parking garage underneath the Senate, I literally saw Capitol Hill police coming and going through that area, some of whom had injuries. and but none of whom flinched. I mean, it was clear that our Capitol Hill police, the security at our Capitol, was caught off guard by the massive riot that ensued, but their courage, their bravery should be heralded for generations to come, because they secured the Capitol and allowed us to reconvene the very same day and complete our work under the Constitution. I will tell you, I was deeply disappointed to see President Trump pardon people that engaged in violence against law enforcement officers on that day. The President has every right under the Constitution to grant pardons, but in that moment I thought it sent the wrong message.
J.D. Vance is now in the role that you had as vice president, and when he was on the campaign trail, I asked him if it gave him any pause to take this job, given how your relationship with the president so changed. He told me he was, quote, extremely skeptical that Mike Pence's life was ever in danger. He said, I think in politics, people like to really exaggerate things from time to time. Would you like to respond to that?
Well, I would just say I'll leave that to the judgment of history.
But do you feel like your life is in danger?
There was never a moment that I've felt physically threatened in that day. I have great confidence in the Secret Service, and I had great confidence in the Capitol Hill Police. It's one of the reasons when they evacuated me from the Senate floor, Caitlin, that I just went to my office across the hallway, because I was confident that they would secure the building quickly, not knowing the sheer size of the riot that was unfolding. But you know, I've always told my kids the safest place in the world is to be in the center of God's will. And I knew I was where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to be doing. And my focus that day and my memories of that day will always be of the heroes in uniform, but also the fact, as I said last night, that it wasn't any one person that saw us through that day. It was that the elected representatives in both chambers, in both political parties, reconvened and completed their work under the Constitution. As I said on the Senate floor when we reconvened, the world will witness the resilience of our democracy once again, and I believe they did that day. But for my part, I'll always be grateful for God's grace, seeing us through that moment.
It was nearly 10 years ago, almost. Hard to believe that you said on the campaign trail in 2016, character matters to the presidency, and Donald Trump will bring the highest level of integrity to the highest office in the land. You can count on it. Do you still feel that way today?
Well, I want to be very clear. I'm very proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. President Trump and I had a good professional and personal relationship for 4.5 years. I surprise people sometimes when I tell them that we never had a crossword between us until those fateful days at the end. We're very different men. We have different ways of expressing ourselves and in some ways different priorities, but we had a great working relationship, and I think we delivered for the American people. For me, ultimately, character in public life is about doing what you said you're going to do. And we did that in our 4 years. And I will tell you that in the early days of this new Trump administration, I think the president in many ways has been doing that again. He's delivered on securing the border. He's restored morale in our military, where now recruitment in our military, having been flagging over the last several years, is now exceeding goals in every branch of our service. We took the fight to the Houthis on their soil on our terms and fought back after the Biden administration had largely abandoned the region. And I think all those steps give evidence of the fact that President Trump is keeping his word to the American people, just as we did. Where I'm going to continue to seek to be a voice as a happy warrior and the conservative that I've always been is where I see this Trump administration departing from the successful policies of our administration, whether it be making the tax cuts permanent, when some in and around the administration are talking about actually raising the top marginal rate a move that would be an enormous tax increase on small business owners across this country. Where I see the wavering support for Ukraine, it contradicts the strong leadership on the world stage that President Trump and our administration provided in our first 4 years. And where I see a marginalizing of the right to life, both in personnel and in policy decisions, that's different from our administration.
What do you attribute those changes to?
We stood strong for the right to life.
What do you attribute those changes to? I mean, if those were the policies when you were there, and this is what's happening now, is it because you're not there? Is it staffing, or is it the president himself that's changed?
Well, I can't account for it. I know that it's true to say that personnel is policy. We had a diversity of views around the president. His leadership style was to put a lot of people around that resolute desk in the Oval Office, hear a lot of ideas. And I hope even from the outside that I and others can maybe give the president another thought, remind him of the policies that succeeded in our administration, that created security and prosperity and strengthened the values of the American people, preserved our liberties and our courts. And whatever the future holds for me, I'm going to try and be a consistent voice for those conservative values that I think are not only the right policy for the Republican Party, but I think they're the best way forward for a boundless future for the American people.
Vice President Pence, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Caitlin.